There's a type of video that went viral on TikTok a few years ago. It looks simple. A person sits down, turns on the camera, and says, "What I eat for lunch?" Most of the time, it's an American office worker, sitting at a desk, or maybe at home. And then they show the meal. A turkey sandwich on white bread, a small bag of chips, sometimes an apple, sometimes a yogurt with a flavor that doesn't quite exist in nature, a boxed juice or a soda. That's lunch. If they have more time, maybe they microwave something. Mac and cheese from a box, canned soup that's been sitting on a shelf for decades, a frozen personal pizza. And for millions of Americans, this is completely normal, routine, expected. But when someone from Latin America watches that video, the reaction is almost always the same. That's it? That's what they call lunch? Because in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, the Dominican Republic, almost anywhere in Latin America, lunch is something else entirely. It's not a snack. It's not something you eat while checking your phone. It's the main meal of the day. It has structure. It has time. It has weight. There's usually a soup to start. Then a main dish, rice, beans, meat or chicken, vegetables, tortillas or bread, and something to drink, juice, fresh water, something prepared. It's not just food, it's a pause, a real break in the middle of the day. So now the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Two regions, same time of day, completely different definition of what lunch even means. In one, it's fuel. In the other, it's an event. And that difference is not random. It's not about taste. It's not about who eats better. It's about how time itself is organized. Because what you eat at noon is determined long before you open your lunchbox. It's determined by how your day is structured, how your work is designed, how your city moves. And once you understand that, the sandwich starts making sense. Before looking at habits, systems, or history, look at the words. Because language often reveals what a culture values. In Spanish, the word almuerzo carries weight. It implies something complete, a real meal. In Mexico, it's often called la comida, not a snack, not something optional. It's the meal of the day. It usually happens between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m., and it is expected to be substantial. Now, compare that with the English word lunch. It doesn't carry the same meaning. It's simply a midday meal. But the word itself doesn't imply size, importance, or structure. Lunch can be light, quick, functional, something you eat between tasks. And that difference in language is not accidental. It reflects how each culture organizes the day. In Latin America, almuerzo is built into the rhythm of life. It's a pause, a real interruption of activity. In many places, businesses close, doctors leave their offices, small shops shut their doors, because lunch is not just eating, it's time reserved. Now look at the United States. The word lunch fits perfectly into a different rhythm, a continuous workday, minimal interruption. You don't stop the day, you insert food into it. And that changes everything, because when a meal is treated as a break, it expands. When it's treated as a task, it shrinks. Now think about how people actually eat. In many Latin American cities, lunch is taken with intention. People sit down, they order or bring a full meal. They take their time. Even if it's not luxurious, even if it's simple, the structure remains. Now compare that to an American office. Lunch often happens at a desk, in front of a screen. Emails still open, meetings still scheduled. Time is limited, so the food adapts. It becomes portable, compact, easy to eat without stopping. And that's why a sandwich works, because it fits the system, not because it's culturally preferred. Now look at the deeper implication. When language defines lunch as something important, people protect that time. When language defines it as something secondary, it becomes flexible. And flexibility often leads to reduction. Less time, less structure, less emphasis. So before analyzing behavior, you can already see the difference. One culture builds the day around the meal. The other builds the meal around the day. And once that structure is in place,
Everything else follows.
The difference between lunch in the United States and lunch in Latin America did not happen by chance. It was not gradual. It was not cultural preference. It was structural. And it began with one of the most powerful forces in modern history, the Industrial Revolution. Before factories reshaped daily life, the United States followed a very different rhythm. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the main meal of the day was not dinner at night. It was eaten at midday, and it was called dinner. At that time, dinner did not mean an evening meal. It meant the largest, most important meal of the day, served between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. The evening meal was lighter, smaller, closer to what many people today would recognize as a snack or a simple supper. In other words, early American eating patterns were much closer to what still exists in Latin America and parts of Europe today. A strong meal in the middle of the day, a lighter one at night. But that structure depended on one key condition: time. People worked closer to home. Schedules were flexible. The day allowed for a real pause. That changed when industrialization took over. Factories introduced a new logic. Time was no longer flexible. It was measured, controlled, maximized. Workers had to be present for fixed hours. Production lines could not stop. Every minute became valuable. And with that shift, the midday pause began to shrink. Workers could no longer leave their workplace to return home. Distances were too great. Schedules were too rigid. The system required continuity. So the long midday meal started to disappear. In its place came something new, a short break. 20 minutes, maybe 30, just enough time to eat quickly and return to work. Now, think about what kind of food fits into that structure. Not a full meal, not multiple courses, not something that requires preparation, serving, and time. You need something immediate, something portable, something efficient. And that's where lunch, as we know it today in the United States, begins. A functional meal, built around the constraints of time, not tradition. As that system expanded, it didn't just change work, it changed the entire rhythm of the day. Because if the main meal could no longer happen at midday, it had to move somewhere else. And there was only one place left: the evening. Dinner shifted from noon to night. And with that shift, the structure of eating in the United States was permanently transformed. What used to be the center of the day became secondary, and what used to be light became the main event. All because the system no longer allowed time for anything else.
Once the workday changed, food had to follow, because a system that only gives you 30 minutes to eat will never produce the same kind of meal as a system that gives you an hour or more. That difference shapes everything. In the United States, the lunch break became short, fixed, and non-negotiable. You don't leave the workplace. You don't go home. You don't sit down for an extended meal. You stay close, you eat quickly, and you return to work. Now think about what kind of food fits into that structure. It has to be fast, easy to carry, easy to eat. No preparation required, no cleanup, no interruption. That's exactly why the American lunch looks the way it does. A sandwich works because it can be assembled in minutes. It doesn't require utensils. It doesn't need to be heated. You can eat it with one hand. Chips come in a bag. No serving needed. No plates. No time lost. Yogurt comes in a container. Open it, eat it, throw it away. Even microwavable meals follow the same logic. 3 minutes, done. Everything is designed to fit inside a time limit, not to create an experience. Now compare that to the structure of lunch in Latin America. The system allows more time, sometimes an hour, sometimes longer. And that changes the type of food completely. You can have multiple courses. You can sit down. You can order something prepared or eat something that was cooked earlier at home. There is room for heat, for variety, for sequence. Soup first, then the main dish, then something to drink. The meal unfolds, not because people are trying to eat more, but because the structure allows it. Now go back to the American system. Even if someone wanted to eat a full meal like that, the system doesn't support it. There isn't enough time, there isn't enough space, there isn't enough distance between work and food, so the meal becomes compressed, simplified, reduced to its most efficient form, and over time that efficiency becomes normal. People don't question it, they adapt to it, they build habits around it, and eventually it stops feeling like a limitation. It just feels like lunch. Now here's the key point. The American lunch is not smaller because people don't care about food. It's smaller because the system doesn't allow anything else. And when a system defines how much time you have, it also defines what you eat.
Once the structure of the day changed, a new opportunity appeared, a massive one, because millions of people now had the same problem. They needed to eat quickly, without preparation, without time, without leaving their workplace. And when a problem exists at that scale, an industry forms around it. The American food industry didn't just adapt to the new lunch, it optimized it. Every product was designed to solve the same equation: minimum time, maximum convenience, acceptable taste. That's where many of the most recognizable lunch products were born. Pre-sliced bread that stays soft for days. Individually wrapped cheese that doesn't behave like natural cheese but lasts longer and melts consistently. Packaged deli meats, ready to assemble in seconds. Everything built for speed. Now take something like Lunchables, a small plastic box, crackers, processed cheese, sliced meat. No cooking, no utensils, no preparation, just open and eat. It was introduced in the late 1980s, and it became an instant success because it perfectly matched the system. Kids could take it to school, parents didn't need time to prepare lunch, no refrigeration was strictly required for short periods. It solved a problem that millions of families faced every day. And it wasn't just for children. The same logic expanded across the entire food market. Microwave meals, frozen dinners, canned soups, pre-packaged snacks, all designed to fit into limited time windows. Not because people demanded lower quality food, but because the system demanded speed. Now compare that to Latin America. The food industry exists there too. Processed foods are widely available, but they don't fully replace the midday meal, because the system still allows time for cooking or for buying freshly prepared food nearby. Street vendors, small restaurants, family kitchens. There are options that don't depend entirely on packaged solutions. So while processed food exists, it doesn't dominate lunch in the same way. Now go back to the United States. If your lunch break is 20 or 30 minutes and you cannot leave your workplace easily, and you don't have access to freshly cooked meals nearby, then the packaged option becomes the default, not the exception. And once that becomes normal, the industry grows around it, improves it, scales it, and reinforces it. So what looks like a cultural preference is actually a system supported by an entire economic structure designed to keep lunch fast, simple, and predictable.
Now put both systems side by side. Same time of day, same purpose, completely different outcome. Imagine two workers. They don't know each other. They're not trying to compare anything. They're just eating. One is in Mexico City, the other is in a U.S. office. It's noon. Both open what they brought. The Mexican worker opens a container. Inside, there's rice, beans, a piece of chicken in sauce, 2 tortillas wrapped in foil, still warm. There's color, there's aroma. The meal has structure. It looks like something that was prepared, cooked, assembled with intention. Now look at the American worker. They open a bag, take out a sandwich in a plastic zip bag, a small pack of chips, maybe a yogurt. Everything is compact, everything is separate, everything is ready to eat immediately. No heat, no sequence, no pause. Both workers eat, both finish, both go back to work. But what they just experienced is not the same. One had a meal, the other had fuel. And that difference goes beyond food. It reflects how each system treats time. In Latin America, the midday meal still carries weight, even when people are busy, even when schedules are tight. There is an effort to maintain structure because the meal is expected to matter. Now look at the United States. The structure is gone. The expectation is different. Lunch is not where the day slows down, it's where the day continues. And that changes how people relate to food. Because when something is rushed, it becomes functional. When something has time, it becomes meaningful. Now think about what that does over years, decades, a lifetime. One system trains you to stop, to sit, to eat with intention. The other trains you to continue, to optimize, to minimize interruption. Neither system is accidental. Both are consistent. Both are reinforced every single day, and eventually they become normal. So when someone from Latin America sees an American lunch, it feels incomplete. And when an American sees a full midday meal, it feels excessive. Not because one is right or wrong, but because each one was built for a completely different version of the day.
If you want to understand why adults eat the way they do, you have to look at where the habit starts: childhood. Because the definition of lunch is not learned at work, it is learned in school. And this is where the difference between the United States and Latin America becomes even clearer. In the United States, school is a full-day system. Children arrive early in the morning, around 8 a.m., and they stay until 3 or 4 p.m. They do not go home at midday. They stay inside the system, and at some point during the day, they are given a time slot, 20 minutes, maybe 30. This is called the lunch period. Not a break, not a pause, lunch. And for millions of children, that is the main meal of the day. They line up in a cafeteria, they receive a tray, food is already prepared, pre-selected, standardized. Milk in a carton, a main item, a side, sometimes fruit. Everything designed for speed. Eat, finish, return to class. Now compare that to many schools in Latin America. The structure is completely different. The school day often ends earlier, around noon or shortly after. Children go home, and that's where the real meal happens, at the table, with family. What happens during school hours is not lunch. It's a recess, called recreo or descanso. And what children eat during that time is not a full meal. It's a snack, a piece of fruit, a small sandwich, something to hold them until they get home. That difference in naming is important. In the United States, the system defines lunch as something that happens at school. In Latin America, the system defines lunch as something that happens at home, and that shapes expectations from a very early age. An American child grows up learning that lunch is quick, efficient, something you eat between activities. A Latin American child grows up learning that lunch is central, structured, something you sit down for. And those habits don't disappear. They carry into adulthood. Now, consider the long-term effect. If you spend your entire childhood eating lunch in 25 minutes in a cafeteria without a real pause, that becomes normal. You don't question it later. You replicate it, at work, at home, everywhere. Because it's not just a habit, it's a system you were trained in. And once a habit is built at that level, it becomes very difficult to change. At this point, the difference is no longer just cultural. It becomes biological, because how you structure your meals directly affects how your body processes them. For decades, nutrition experts have studied how timing impacts metabolism, and the pattern is consistent. The human body processes food more efficiently earlier in the day. Energy is used, burned, converted into activity. But as the day progresses, the body begins to slow down. Hormonal signals shift. Digestion becomes less efficient. Energy is more likely to be stored rather than used. Now think about the two systems. In Latin America, the largest meal happens at midday, when the body is active, when there are still hours ahead to use that energy. Dinner is lighter, smaller, easier to process before rest. Now compare that to the United States. Lunch is minimal, quick, often processed, and the main meal of the day happens at night, after work, after school, when the body is preparing to rest.
That inversion has consequences, not immediately, but over time. Now add another factor, the type of food. In the United States, the demand for speed created a massive supply of processed products, high in sodium, high in sugar, high in refined fats, easy to prepare, easy to store, easy to consume quickly. And when those foods become the default, they shape long-term health outcomes. This is not speculation. Public health data has been tracking this for decades. The United States has one of the highest obesity rates in the world. Over 40% of adults are classified as obese, not just overweight, obese. And while many factors contribute to this, diet structure is one of the most consistent. Now here's the important point. This is not just about personal choice, it's about available time. Because preparing a full meal takes effort, planning, cooking, cleaning. And if your schedule does not allow that time, you adapt. You choose what fits. Fast food, packaged meals, microwave options. Not because you prefer them, but because they are compatible with your day. Now compare that to Latin America. The system still allows, in many places, time for a real midday meal. Not everywhere, not always, but often enough to maintain the habit. And that changes the relationship with food. Because when you have time, you cook differently, you eat differently, you digest differently. Now here's the turning point. Latin America is changing. Work schedules are becoming more demanding. School days are extending. Urban life is accelerating. And with that shift, the same pressures that shaped the American lunch are beginning to appear. Less time, more convenience, more processed food. So this is not just a comparison, it's a transition. One system already established, the other slowly moving toward it. And that raises a final question, not about what exists today, but about what will exist tomorrow.
And once you start looking at it this way, you realize something important. This was never just about food, or sandwiches, or what people eat at noon. It's about how different systems shape everyday life in ways most people never stop to question. Because two countries can look at the same moment of the day and build it completely differently. One turns it into a pause. The other turns it into a task. One protects the time. The other compresses it. And over time, that difference becomes invisible. It just feels normal until you see the contrast. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The next time you sit down for lunch, wherever you are, pay attention, not just to what's on the plate, but to how much time you have, because that tells you more about your system than the food itself. If you enjoy this type of content, where we break down how everyday things work differently across countries, make sure to subscribe. New videos every week. And once you start noticing these differences, you'll see them everywhere.